Today I'm going to talk about .NET Core CLI. We're going to go through a tour of all the features and functionalities that it offers. And this is a little bit about me. Promise just one slide. My name is Brian McKeiver. I am co-owner and solutions architect at BizStream. We're a software development shop in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Anybody been to Grand Rapids, Michigan? Okay, 2. All right, sweet. So it's lovely. It's very easy. When you're from Michigan, you have this, right? You have the hand thing. Detroit's over here. Grand Rapids is way, way, way over here. Farther side, west side of the state. It's beautiful. I highly recommend it. But that was my pitch for Grand Rapids, Michigan. I do have a blog. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter, so you can find me in multiple places. And I've been doing this for about 18 years in the .NET world. So I'm going to cover a little bit of history of how we got to .NET Core, CLI, and things like that. But I thought I would start with kind of why. Why is there something that we need to worry about when it comes to a CLI for .NET? And the issue is that tooling is hard, right? Has anyone ever used something like Visual InterDev? All right, got a few old timers in the room. Cool, very cool. This is actually the precursor to Visual Studio. And this is when tooling really first kind of started. I don't really consider FrontPage and Dreamweaver tooling for even further back. But eventually, when ASP Classic started and .NET, the first version, we had to have properties and paths, and that became a project file. And that project file is what made all these IDEs work, and it also told the compiler some useful information as opposed to having to kind of type it out yourself. On top of that, usually you have more than one project, right? Then came solutions, and this kind of came about the same time. Solutions were always there, but I just thought it was a fun graphic to keep going on the timeline. But now that we have multiple projects, which one are we going to build? How are we going to build it? What are we going to tell the compiler? It became more and more complex. And then on top of that, eventually people want to start doing this on more than just Windows boxes. They want to become cross-platform. On top of that, not to mention, we have traversed from ASP Classic to the .NET Framework, versions 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, depending on how you count it, and now .NET Core, right? So we have legacy code that we have to worry about, including the full framework with .NET Core and a couple of those things. And when you put all these things together, how do you make one thing that is super easy to go compile or run or build, and it works across all of these complexities, right? It's not easy. And previously, the answer was MS Build and C# compiler exe, right? Anyone worked with MS Build in this day and age? Yeah, a couple more people. Anyone like it? Yeah, it was awful. Remember like 13,000 lines of XML with 25 GUIDs that you had no idea what the hell was going on? That was MS Build. It was like black voodoo magic, okay? So Microsoft and the .NET Core team decided, hey, let's try to be better. And they introduced, a couple years ago, with version 1, a new command line interface, a CLI. And it's called the .NET Core CLI. Anybody in the room actually use this tool? Oh, awesome. I've given this talk once before, and no one had heard about it. And we have 50% in this room that actually use it. Very cool, very cool. And when it first came out, it actually introduced this concept of project.json. And this is like .NET Core 1.1.1 timeframe. And I think it was a great idea, right? Because instead of 13,000 lines of MS Build XML black voodoo magic, we have nice readable JSON. And you can kind of tell what's going on here. We kind of have a www root folder that has a dependency to .NET's IIS server components. And I can even go that, yeah, it's actually like .NET Framework 4.5, and it's got some modules. But at least I can kind of tell what's going on, right? And this was supposed to revolutionize what we did with project files, and it was supposed to make Visual Studio way easier to work with, and it was also supposed to be able to make VS Code kind of come to life as well. It was like the new messiah of build tools. But I equate this tool, project.json, to this. It kind of came out, had a lot of steam, but it kind of backfired. Okay? I'm going to do it again for effect. And backfired. Does anyone want to take a guess why it backfired? Backwards compatibility, yes. Enterprise, large people who had used the .NET Framework for years and years and years have lots of projects. there's no way that anyone wants to touch a VB .NET 1.1 app that runs a mission-critical banking software to try to switch out the old CS project style with the new project.json, right? That's too dangerous, way too much work. No one wants to touch those things. They probably, like 10-foot pole, get away from me, get away from me. So really, the community, us as developers, kind of fought back on the Microsoft.NET Core team and said, hey, this is cool, this is, right? I like it, it makes sense, but again, it's not gonna work. One more time, and ouch. So I'm a CrossFitter, in case you can't tell, that's my thing. And what happens is eventually they decided, no, you know what, we will go back and we will look at MS Build with regular XML style comments, but we'll clean it up. So they kind of introduced MS Build like 2.0 in a way, is what you can think of it. And MS Build 2.0 basically takes the same concepts of Project.json and makes things a lot tighter, a lot easier to read. It's still pretty much human readable, and that's actually about a real size of a multi-tier ASP website these days, right? We've got a couple projects at the bottom. We have a couple packages there at the bottom. It's a .NET Core 2.2 site and a few things to include, right? This is actually what happens now when you build new projects in .NET Core. We don't use project.json, we use MS Build, and MS Build 2 is actually what the .NET Core CLI pretty much works with and looks for. So the nice thing about this style is you can actually kind of work with it in Notepad or VS Code if you wanted to. It's very simple. You can actually edit it. If you change the target framework from .NET Core App 2.2 to 3.0, because 3.0 is actually coming out pretty soon. It was at Build this year. Pretty big deal. Your project will just pretty much work. And now you'll have to do some fun Nougat package restores, but basically this new style is where all of everything else I'm going to show you works on top of. But at the end of the day, we're kind of working with these files and other things. But a little bit more focus on the .NET Core CLI itself. It's broken out to 3 components, basically. We have what's called the driver, and that's the .NET command that you type every time. The command that you want to run, new, to create a new project, or class library, or from a template. And then other things like watch, pack, solution. There's different things you can do, and then all of them have options. So a lot of you have used it in the room, and you know that you're doing like -O, -N, -F, all the things that the kids love these days in NPM world almost, basically. And what happens is, we'll get into using all those tools, but basically, again, this thing is kind of one big wrapper to MS Build, which is why I explained it to start out with. And it's not only what MS Build can do in terms of Visual Studio projects, it also adds in other things. So all of the compile, build, restore, run, that is mostly handled in the actual new MS Build 2.0, but they didn't want to expose that because it's still not too developer friendly. They added the wrapper on to make it developer friendly, to make it easy to use, and also they included some other things, like new as a command and pack for creating a Nougat package really quickly. And also the last one, anyone want to guess what BYOT means? It's definitely not close. Tool, there you go. You can actually create your own tools in the .NET Core CLI world, and I'll show you one of those as well. But before we get into actually digging into the demo and the commands, I thought I would kind of explain the scenario that we're going to build today. All right? And my job at our company is to build or help our team build very large, complex websites that have e-commerce, integrations with ERPs and things like this. And we're starting to move away from these big, large, monolithic installs of databases all over the place into basically something that's called a headless CMS. Anyone in the room heard of a headless CMS? A couple head nods. You don't count because you work there. But basically, this is Kentico Cloud. It's a way to manage your content in the cloud. You log in just like you would log into Salesforce or Office 365 or anything else. You can make models of your content, products, articles, homepage content, and you can manage it all. And everything that you do is really kind of marketing, business type person friendly. And when you hit save and publish, it all is shot out over an API. That's on a content delivery network that is fast and around the world. And after you do that, what happens is they also have a set of tools that allow us to generate in multiple languages, not just C#, but I'm showing C# here, models for your MVC apps or your React apps or your Python or iOS. They have all these tools that will just look at the API and generate the model for you in your classes and in your code. And it kind of comes out with everything like title, text, summary, content, open graph image. It gives you all these nice fields and things like that. And one of the things that they have done is produce a boilerplate that is a .NET Core MVC site. And it connects to that API so that, again, we can do the things that developers love. We can write code. We can have it all be done in CI and do all these fancy things, but also have the business team still edit things and not have just static HTML that, you don't want to go redeploy code just because someone wants to change a typo or update a picture, right? That's where the power of this tool comes in. So we're going to build a website using this boilerplate. And instead of talking about it more, I'll actually just show you. OK, hoping. All right, great. Can't see it. So is it big enough for the guys in the back of the room to kind of see, or do you want me to go bigger? All right, get a thumbs up. Cool. I'm going to use PowerShell for this demo, right? There's a couple reasons for that. But I get asked the question all the time, like, hey, Brian, why aren't you using the terminal in VS Code to do this, right? That would be the natural thing. And basically, there's a few niceties that come in PowerShell that still don't work in VS Code's terminal. And I'll get into those. But you could. You really could do almost everything I'm going to do today in the terminal there or in the developer command prompt in the old school. But PowerShell is my favorite way to use this. Also, PowerShell scales so the crowd can actually see the text, right? So that's important for me for today. And of course, as we said, the command is .NET. And if we want to look at anything in the .NET Core CLI, we can use -H. On every level of every command, they did a really great job of providing help to everything that you're going to do. All right, so we have options, arguments, what the arguments do. If you're ever curious, that's kind of the first place to start, is do -S. And here is our SDK commands that we're going to do this. But sorry, I should back up a little bit. Chances are you actually already have the .NET Core CLI installed on your machine if you have a recent version of Visual Studio. It comes with like Visual Studio 2019 revision 15.2 and higher or something like that. It's just in your directory already. If you don't have that installed, you can go to the Microsoft site. All you got to look for is .NET Core SDK tools package, and you can download it and it will install it. I'm skipping that part because I'm assuming everyone in this room can install an executable file from a website. Otherwise, you're in the wrong industry. Sorry. Okay? So I'm assuming you have your machine. You can really just type, oh, now I can't see the bottom. You really just type .NET, new, or H, or whatever, and here we go. So I'm going to try to clear the screen as much as I can bring it back to the top. But if I forget that, just yell, hey, clear the screen so it comes back up to the top. Otherwise, it's hard to read at the bottom. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is .NET New with an H, because there's so many options for .NET New, and it's nice to have a list of what to work with. And anytime that we're doing a new command, we're actually building something from a template. And the SDK provides already like pre-built templates for just about everything you can imagine in standard Visual Studio, right? Class library, MVC site, API project, unit testing projects, and a few other ones that you can use. Here are all the options and in what language they are supported. Again, for our scenario today, I'm going to try to build an MVC site that connects to Kensco Cloud. So what I actually want to do at first is I'm going to build a class library. So I'm going to use ClassLib as the template name for the type of project that I want to build. And if I just do that, it's pretty cool. It creates a project. It restores any packages that it needs because the template can contain references in it if you want to, or if you use the built-in ones. And without doing anything else other than that, it's picking up the name of what it did from the folder that we were in. And that's a really important concept. Context of the folder, I'm in the CLI folder, so it made a class library just called CLI. And that kind of comes and becomes like everything that's in your project. If we look at that project file, what it generated is really simple. This is MS Build 2.0, and it went with .NET Standard.
What is the cat coming with?
Sorry, what's the question?
You said cat.
Cat?
Yeah, cat.
Do you call yourself a Windows developer? cat is just paste it to the command prompt. Yeah. That's a Windows command. Yeah. Okay, so .NET Standard 2 is the framework that any project with this tooling starts with, because basically that's the new unified .NET framework that makes it work in any version of full framework of .NET or .NET Core, right? If you want to make a library that's reusable as much as possible, you want to target .NET Standard at least this year. With .NET 5 coming out, maybe not next year, but for now, that's still a good recommendation. Now, I actually don't want that, because maybe that's not a great name, and obviously that's not the framework that I want to work in. So again, the .NET New command has tons of options. I'm going to do I want a different name. So I'm going to do something with the output parameter, which is -o, and I'm going to call it Kentco lib. And I also want to not have .NET Standard. Actually, really, for my project, everything I want is .NET Core 2.2. So I can say .NET Core app 2.2, if I could type. Sorry, I'm not the greatest typer. And now it will listen to that, and instead of just creating it based off the context, we have a new folder, and in that folder is our library that's named with the name that we want. And if I look at the directory, the target property, target framework of the project, I'm now .NET Core 2.2. So that's how the options and the arguments can play on top of the template of the project that we're creating. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Now, from there, in a typical website, you might have a library that has some reusable helper functions and a lot of your models and things like that, but maybe you actually want to have an API that sits on top of that shared class library. I'm going to create that for our scenario today, and I'm going to do .NET New, and instead of class lib for the template, I'm going to use Web API. And if I don't know what to do for Web API, I can again do .NET H, and it starts giving me all these options and parameters about working with a Web API project type. You know, whether it needs authentication or not, all that can be configured through switches. But I'm just going to skip that, and instead of doing just a help to figure it out, I'm actually going to create it with the output of Kentco API. And I'm also going to do the same framework. .NET Core app 2.2. So this one might take slightly longer because it's going to bring down more things, and it's actually going to create a Web API project. The same thing that you would do if you were in Visual Studio, new Web API project. And it looks like it succeeded. So that can be our API that reuses our class library. But we're also going to want to create a website, right? So I'm going to use another template, .NET New. And this time I'm going to use one that Kentco provides. And I don't remember the name, so I'm going to use my friendly help extension to see what the template is. And it's Kentco-cloud-MVC. And that's actually an instance of a custom tool that I've added into the .NET Core CLI, but I'll get to that later on in the demo. So Kentco Cloud MVC. And this time, I know a little bit about this template. I'm actually going to use the -n parameter. Does anyone want to take a guess between -o and -n when we're creating something new? Very good. Yes. This will actually just give me the right name, but it won't change the output path, because I know that this template actually creates its own subdirectory. So I'm going to do Kentco MVC. And I also know that for this one, it already does the target framework the right way. And look how fast that was. That was really quick. Oh, man. But you know what? I did it in the wrong place. So I didn't actually want to create these two things in the Kentco lib directory. But here's the cool thing, right? If you ever screw up and you have the wrong folder level and the wrong context, I'm just going to remove it really quick. Yeah, let's see. See if I got that right. Yep. And one of the reasons I like this is because you can do this really, really fast, as opposed to in the old days with Visual Studio, you would be sitting here for forever, like right-click, delete, unload project. Like it would kind of take longer to go through and click everything to if you made a mistake like I just did. And because I'm using PowerShell and it remembers my commands, I can just run the same commands again. So I'm going to make that Web API project now at the root of my directory, and I'm going to make that MVC project, the website, at the root of my directory. If I can remember which one it was. Yes. Okay, so now we're looking a little bit more cleaner. We have 3 folders, class library, API that looks at the library, well, not yet, but it will, and an MVC project. And if I do look at that MVC project, you can see there's actually standard stuff. We have model view controllers, WW roots, CS proj, all that normal thing that you would expect with an MVC project. All right. Now, anybody want to guess what one issue may be that we still have to do if we're doing this from the command line? Okay, that's a tough question. These are just 3 separate projects. We need a solution to tie it all together, right? And it's funny, when I think about solution, it's tempting to maybe think that there is like a solution command. And there is, to work with solutions. Oops, sorry, you have to actually type it .NET, not just dot.
What's the dot point?
Sorry? The dot. Okay, I see what you did there. That was good. That's an error. That's an error, is the actual answer to that. But the solution command is the first place I went to look for creating a new solution. It only has add, list, and remove as options. It's actually still just a .NET new. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Go back to the top. So it's weird. Working with solutions, you use the solution command, but to create a new solution, you have to use the new command. That's one thing I think the team at the core could do a little bit more consistency, right? Nothing else in the tooling kind of works that way. So I'm going to make a new solution. And let's see, my options are pretty much, you know what, the cool thing is, to make a new solution, I'm just going to do it right at the context. And it will, again, take the name of what I made. Except for I forgot I actually don't want to call it that. I actually want to call it -n for just Kentico. And now we have a solution and 3 empty projects not quite tied together yet. But just to prove this all works and I'm not crazy, I thought we'd break into Visual Studio at this point and just show you that this stuff actually works, right? I would hope that it does. And, oh, it's empty. Because we got to add the projects to the solution, right? So let's do that really quickly. There is another set of commands that's somewhat easy. That basically, you can say .NET solution add. And if I'm looking at this right, it's going to say what's the project that we want to add, which we need the csproj file to add the project to the solution. So I'm going to do all the projects that we have just created, just like this. So that project was added to the solution for the API. Now we'll add the class library, and we'll add the MVC site. Okay, so now when we look at that solution, okay, I don't know what that was. That probably is me practicing earlier. The solution should be full of those projects. Good, we're loading 3 projects. It's going to come in, and it will work just like as if you created it in the Explorer. Right? But this is an architecture that we're trying to create that maybe we're relying on one of the projects to be the base of the other projects. So we're pretty close to having things the way you might want to create it. But if you look at the dependencies and things like that, we don't have any project level dependencies. They're not connected to each other yet. So again, .NET CLI can do that. And let me make sure that I can get that to the right place. And that is the .NET add command. There are 2 options when you want to use the add command. You can either add a package or a project reference. So I'm going to add project references to the solution that we're in, to the projects that we're in, sorry. So the easiest way to do that is to think about the context of what folder you want to add libraries and dependencies to. So I'm actually going to change to the API project. And then I'm going to use the .NET add command there to add a reference to the Kensco library project. And I forgot one important thing, which is you actually have to tell it which type of add, and that is project. Did I do that right? Reference. Sorry, not project. Thank you, whoever said that. Very good. So you had a reference, and now the Kensco API project depends on the Kensco class library project. And one thing that's really cool about Visual Studio is before I could even switch back to it, it live reloaded that, and we now have a project reference in the API from the library. That's new in Visual Studio 2019, right? Before, it would give you a prompt that says, hey, something's changed on your file system. Click here to reload the project, right? Annoying as hell, especially if you've got source control. Annoying, pop, 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 like shut up, Jesus. So now with Studio, the newer versions, these things, they just kind of reload. And I'm going to do the same thing with the MVC project. So I'm going to add the same library dependency to that. And there it is. And it would, even if I was really, really fast, you know, there it is. Okay? So that's one way you can use the add command. The other way you can use the add command is to add Nougat packages to your solution. And why would that be important to maybe do from a command line? Restore or add Nougat packages to your project. Continuous integration, right? Azure DevOps, pipelines, builds, all that stuff all of this stuff is useful in that CI scenario where you want to automate deployments, you want to automate continuously testing your software. This is kind of why this stuff is important to use, or why it's really cool that you can use it, as opposed to the old days where it's like copy files over an FTP server, right? We don't want to do that anymore. And especially now that the way Nougat packages work, we want to make sure that they're restored and they're tested the right way. So I'm going to go into the Kensco library folder, maybe. What in the world? No. Don't need dots. I have not had enough coffee today. And I'm going to add not a reference to a project, but I'm going to add a package. And there's lots of options for like what kind of package and all these things to figure out for adding Nougat packages. You know, technically, if you're not sure, and I would still recommend doing this with the IDE in Visual Studio, like manage Nougat packages, search for the ones you want, and then kind of bring it down with the GUI. But when you're trying to automate things, this is kind of cool because actually you can basically just say, I'm in the context of the class library project. I want to just add a package by name. So if I type newtonsoft.json, what it's going to do is it's going to search Nougat, just like the GUI does, and try to figure out, hey, what version of Newtonsoft should I use? Okay, this project, because our CS project file has Net Core App 2.2 as the target, should actually use version 12.02. And it's done all that for me with a simple command of just add package, right? And that's kind of cool. But the thing is, I cheated, and literally, the Newtonsoft package is the only package name I can ever remember off the top of my head. Seriously. I'm not really good at remembering package names. But one of the reasons I like PowerShell to do this is that it has autocomplete. As long as you enable it, and I'll tell you how in a second, but basically, if you want to do things like, you know, I think it's like graph maybe or something like that, tab completion through all of the Nougats out in the world. And there's a lot of Nougats, right? Lots. So, but you still can tab complete to find the package you want, and then I can add that package using that system. So it's kind of cool. You don't have to actually remember the name as long as you enable autocomplete in PowerShell. And of course, you can remove packages. So I don't actually want the Microsoft Graph package. So I believe it's just remove. And now it's removing my package from my project. And again, if we just look at that CS project file, very simple. We added Newtonsoft, and then we added and removed Graph. So it's pretty clean. It's that version. It figured it out. It was that version of .NET Core. Pretty cool. Question?
Can you specify a specific version?
Yes. Yep. There's a -v option for version, and you can get just the one that you know, if you know ahead of time. So yeah, good question. Okay. All right. So there's adding package references and all that good stuff. So that was all about managing projects and solutions. The big takeaway there is that everything that you can do in Studio from a GUI standpoint, well, hold on, before I get to takeaways, I forgot about tab completion. Out of the box, PowerShell is restrictive because of security. Because you can do a whole lot with PowerShell, right? You can like damn near do anything you want in Windows with PowerShell. So to enable tab completion with the .NET Core SDK, you actually have to follow this set of instructions. And it's a pretty common Google search, but there's the link on how to do it. It takes basically 4 lines of a PowerShell script that you run as an admin instance of PowerShell. And as soon as you run that, it enables the right security policy, and then tab completion works. So anything that's like super special, like calling out to Nougat's index of packages and tab completing, you need to do this step with. It's not very hard, but I was really angry because when I really started with this stuff, I kept typing things wrong and it wouldn't tab complete. So I think it's kind of important, and that's why I wanted to add it today. Now, again, takeaways for this part of the demo. Anything that you do with Visual Studio, you can now do with your CLI tools. And if you want to, you can manually edit things in Notepad or VS Code. Go for it. I think that's crazy, but basically, you're not limited to just the Visual Studio GUI. And what that does is it allows for things like automation, right? That's a pretty cool set of things. But probably more cool than just working with projects and solutions is what you can do to restore, build, run, publish these things. And that's the next set of demos. So now that we have our solution kind of configured the way we want to, right? We have our solution with our 3 things. The thing that you probably would be tempted to do is maybe restore all the packages. And it's actually this simple. You do restore, and it does a look through the solution to all the projects and does all the packages. But actually, with 2.2, you no longer have to do restore. It's part of the build command every time. And that's one of the complaints that the .NET Core team had with the first version of the CLI, is you always had to be like restore, restore, restore all over and over and over. So now anytime that there is something that needs to be restored, like in build or publish or watch, it'll just do it for you automatically. So when we build, it's going to just do the things that it needs to do, hit the compile, create our DLLs, and we're off and running, right? And it would restore any packages that are missing. And now that the project is built, we can actually just decide that, oh, is it time to run it for the first time or not? And nope, it's not quite that smart. You can't just run at a solution level, right? Why is that? Yes, doesn't know which project. So actually, our target today is the MVC project. So here, I'm going to say .NET Run. Or I could specify the CS project file path, and basically, it's going to start up, do a build, start if it needs to, and then start up an instance of the built-in web server that comes with .NET Core. And if I go to a web browser, at that port 5000 that's listening, I get a website. So this is the running website of what we just did. Here's some content that's coming down from Kensco Cloud. It's just kind of part of a sample starter, getting started boilerplate, nothing all that special. It kind of comes from the CMS, if you look at sample project, and then you go to content items. Again, this is just so that you can edit these items and articles, and you'd build a real website, right? It wouldn't just be the sample. I haven't hit this in a while, so it might take a second. And the articles that we see right here, the 3 articles, like which brewing fits you, coffee, it's the stuff about coffee. those are items that appear in the content inventory of the CMS that we can edit if the internet is working correctly, which it may not be, or that's a really old project. So let me switch that to maybe a newer project. And basically, this isn't the exact sample, but here's an idea of what it's like to edit the content in the CMS. You can actually create a new version because there's version control in the API and as well as in the editing interface. And you could just start editing, just like any other platform, right? You'd expect that. Nothing all that special. But that is all it takes to run the solution that we just made. I like that because you don't have to think about, should I use IIS Express? Should I do full local IIS? All the tools with .NET Core are just part of the solution. So I think that's kind of cool. All right, now, what I did is a simple, easy way for a developer to get started, right? But does anybody want to maybe think about why that may be something you don't want to do, is just do a .NET run from the root of the project? Pretty much what you're doing there is just relying on the debug build of the solution, right? When you really deploy this to a website, you really don't want to do the debug build. You want to maybe use like the release build. And there are lots of different configuration options for switching to release through a -C. But there's also the idea of publishing, right? In Visual Studio, does anyone use the right-click publish to Azure when they have MVC sites? Yeah. That whole concept is also supported in the CLI tool. So instead of just run, I can actually publish this whole project basically to a local directory. And I got to make sure that I'm doing this right. Yeah, I need the project file. And I actually want to publish it for release. So I'm going to use the -C. Release. Okay? So this is kind of doing about the same thing. It's compiling and deploying stuff into the bin release folder. And that's much better. It's more optimized for production than there's the bin debug folder, which is where we were running from before. And here, I can actually now specify .NET run to that kind of full context or full path to bin release. And we have the version of the .NET Core framework we're targeting. We're going to publish, and we can actually specify the actual DLL that is going to run the website, which is this one, because that's the name that we got from when we created the project. And now, instead of just running and letting it try to figure out building or getting the debug version, we're actually running the production release of the code. And the same thing goes for there. If we hit refresh, the site still comes up. Maybe refresh. At least it should come up. Oh, there it goes. OK. So we didn't change anything, so it looks the same. All right. And it gives you some, web server log type of information about what's hit, what requests are being made, some simple stuff. OK. Now, when you do a production build, what's one thing that you might commonly need to do if you have, say settings that are specific to an environment of dev, QA, and live? Sorry? Yeah, runtime target, or maybe even something like web config transforms or application setting transforms. It can do all of that too, right? So you can actually specify, I think it's, well, actually, I don't know what it is, so we can look it up. But I think it's like -T. Configuration, launch, profile, runtime. Yeah, so there's -- runtime to do the runtime target. So you guys, I'm assuming, again, based off time, you would understand that you can set up all the stuff that you would do, and this is, again, useful in your pipeline of your CI build server and things like that. Of course, there's other ways to do it with Azure DevOps as well, but if you want to script out like the whole thing, maybe, you can use this tool to do that. OK? All right, so that put the project into local directories, right? Put it in our bin release framework directory. You actually can use kind of what's been around in MS Build forever, which is like publishing profiles, to publish to Azure or do certain things. And that's where more publish commands come into play. So you could do something like this. You could do publish actually I'll bring it back to the top. You could publish if you had the web, it would be the project name. And I have to look this one up because it's so crazy long. What's happening here, so p:publish profile, and this would be the name of your publish profile. And then you would do /p:password, because those publish profiles usually have a password in them. Remember how that happens? And what's happening with this is the /p:, it's not actually going to the .NET publish command. It's rerouting that to the MS build argument list. So this is, remember that circle chart I showed where the .NET CLI wraps MS build? That's how it's pushing and passing the right information. And you could have that publishing profile set up to go anywhere, to your server, to Azure, wherever you need to do. I'm not going to go through all that because I don't think we have time. But again, don't forget, if you are doing that, always try to use the -c command for release, because you don't really want to publish your build or your debug build up to your profile. So there's a lot going on with that, but I'm hoping that it kind of makes sense. Does it make sense to everybody so far? Cool. All right, so there's kind of the build, run, and publish set of things. Takeaways there are, automate everything as you can, as much as you can. That's really what we do at Bitstream. We try to just automate just everything we do for all these projects that we create for people around the country, because it's going to save time and reduce your error. Okay. Testing. Anyone do unit testing in the room? Okay, cool. If you didn't raise your hand, start doing unit testing. Okay? Do it. That's all I'm going to say. All right. You don't see that yet, because I got to hit escape on PowerPoint. Wish they would make that easier. Okay. There is, of course, a way to do testing projects, just like you would say new unit test project. I'm going to do .NET New, and I'm actually going to use MS Test. No, I'm going to use VS Test. There are two main testing project types that this thing supports. MS Test, which is the old legacy test that's been in Visual Studio forever, Test Explorer, all that stuff. And then VS Test. VS Test is the newer one that you can use outside of Visual Studio to target a DLL and do those things. But if you want to use other testing frameworks, most of them have those templates in here. So if we actually look at the template list for the new command, we'll see XUnit, NUnit. There's our MS Test for unit test project. Everybody get the idea that you can kind of do any kind of testing that you want. Again, here, I'll just do .NET New VS Test. And I'm going to do -O because I want to name it Kensko Test to follow our convention that we have set up. And I did something wrong. Oh, maybe I didn't install that. All right, you know what? We'll just switch to MS Test. Not a big deal. They're really close to the same thing. Okay. So it made our test project, and we actually want to make sure that shows them our solution, right? So I'm going to do .NET solution add the test project that we just created to our solution. Go back to Visual Studio. Oh, stupid prompt. They haven't fixed this yet. If you add a new project to an existing solution, you do actually have to reload the stupid thing. I have heard that they're going to work on fixing that in upcoming versions. Right? Maybe the Microsoft guy in the room can speak to that. He has no idea. But there's our test project, right? And we're going to do some very fancy testing. I'm just going to do assert r equal 0 and 1. So I'm not even going to scale that for you guys because I don't really care if you can see it or not because it's so simple. Just trust me, this is going to fail every time. Okay? All right? Because I really want to just illustrate that the .NET test command can use the unit test project in your solution. It will find it anywhere that you have testing things set up, and it's going to do just kind of exactly like Test Explorer does. wait, this test method failed on this line because 0 is not 1. Yay, testing worked. Okay? So what that did is it searched the entire solution, found anything that it could, and basically ran those tests for you. Again, you can inject that into your CI build, so it's kind of cool. All right. How am I doing on time? Does anybody know how much time we actually have left? 15 minutes. Okay, good. I still have a couple things to show. All right. Now, if you did want to not rely on the tests and the command to search through your project to find all the tests, and maybe you had some other DLL that you don't have the source code to, you still can use this with VS test as another command, and you can specify a DLL. So in this case, we're going to go to the test DLL. Nope. In the bin directory. In our target framework. This is useful in case, like, say you're working on a multiple team thing and another team gives you a DLL to use in your solution, and there might be tests. You can do this, and basically the same thing is going to happen. But instead of relying on searching through source code and finding things that are marked as test, you can do the whole test, right? Nothing too crazy there. But just to prove this works, I'm going to comment out our failure. And I am going to build the solution to make sure the DLL is updated. I'm going to run that test again. And this time it should say no failure. Yay, look at that. Test succeeded. No failures. All right. So that's testing. Basically, everything you can do Test Explorer, you can do in the CLI tool. All right? Now, I talked about tooling a little bit, how you can bring your own tools to the .NET CLI. Remember the Kentico Cloud project where it has our models of our content? They actually have introduced an example of a custom .NET Core CLI tool, and it's called the Kentico Cloud Model Generator. And it's kind of, sorry it's at the bottom, but to install a custom tool, you use tool install-g for global, a little bit like NPM style. So I want to be able to use this CLI tool anywhere in my system. So I did that part already because I didn't really want to sit here and wait for it to install, because it takes a second. And because I did that, I actually have something called the Cloud Model Generator, which is basically, instead of creating your own command line project and worrying about all the different things you got to do, like parsing arguments and logging, you're kind of piggybacking on top of the fact that the Core CLI tool already does all that and has option handling. So if you do -H, all the documentation and how-to, it's all pretty similar. You can just piggyback on it. And what this does is just basically calls out to the API that Kentico Cloud has. And the one thing I need is the project ID, which is here. And I'm going to pass it the project ID. And I actually want this to generate in a folder called generated. And I want the namespace of the models to match. So I'm going to say Kentico content. Generated. I need -N for name. Sorry, almost did it wrong. And what's happening here is it's reaching out, finding all of our content models, it's creating 13 different content types, and it made all of the C# we need to use those content types. So if I go look, I have a generated directory. Almost. And I have C# class files that represent everything that's in my CMS. And if I look at that, we have a very simple POCO, basically. The code name is something specific to Kentico Cloud and how it matches the actual object in the CMS, but it gives you the strongly typed fields, methods, properties that you need to work with all this. And there's an SDK that's a Nougat package that you just say install the Kentico Cloud Nougat package, and it will give you the factory and providers to fill these objects so that you can use them on your page. It's very simple, pretty cool, and I think it's kind of the future of where CMS is going because it's more code first than big, huge SQL database behind the scenes, right? So that's an example of a custom tool that really works with the .NET Core CLI. And basically, switching gears a little bit to the other somewhat different tools that are in the CLI is NETWatch. So NETWatch is basically something that will watch your directory structure for changes and help you rebuild the DLLs on the fly. So is anyone a front-end developer who maybe works with like NPM a lot or JavaScript or React or something like that? Hot reload is that a concept everybody knows. This custom tool in the CLI basically almost brings hot reload to the .NET world. And it does if you have just something purely server-side like a console exe. What happens here, and we can start running it, is I'm going to do it in the MVC project because that's the one we want to watch. So I'm going to do .NET watch run. What happens here is it kind of starts up a watch. It will build the solution. It will run it in a very simple form. And as we look at things, this should come back up because now that the website is started. I'm going to try to do it this way. So see, every time that we make a request, it's hitting, and at least it should. Oh, I clicked the wrong link. Do that again. It rendered out because it made a request into the tool. But here's what's interesting. With a watch, most of us, if you're a .NET developer in MVC, you're used to the fact that I can actually change a view on the fly. And we know that a front-end change, like just doing this to the H1, the minute we hit save, we can just go over here and reload, and our visuals update, right? Because that's a front-end file that's not compiled. But how often are you doing things like on the home controller on the back ends? By the way, this is the code that actually populates the articles from the Kentico Cloud API. 4 lines of code to get all those articles onto the homepage. That's pretty cool, and it's a lot of filters for different things. But if you're doing something like making a comment, and then you hit save, and if this is typically running in Visual Studio, it'll say, "Oh, you can't save this. You can't edit and continue." What the watch thing will do, and actually every time I click save, so we can actually do like I don't know, view bag label. Okay, and I save that, and I'm trying to switch back really fast, but it knows that a file changed, and it's rebuilding those DLLs for me, and restarts the site. So it's automating the things that you have to do sometimes if you want to do like edit and continue. And basically, if we had some changes, okay, I don't know what happened there. Let's see, I probably wrote some bad code. Request ID unhandled exception thrown, cannot apply index. Yeah, so I wrote some bad code, which is I'm really good at. We'll just get rid of this. And it will recompile again because we're watching it. So file changed, recompile. I refresh this, and the site comes back. I don't have to stop, start, recompile. Question?
Can you edit while debugging, or is that still a no-go?
Still no-go. If you're debugging, you're attached to the thing, and you actually have that breakpoint just stopped, yeah, that would be nice.
Does the watch the refer projects? Like if you made a change in the Kento lib, would it notice that?
I'm pretty sure it does, because they're dependent. But let's do it. It's just to see if I'm right or wrong, because actually I didn't think about doing that. So I'll just put a comment. Save that. Oh, and it did. So it's kind of cool. Yep.
When you hit that reload prompt earlier, would that have stopped the automation?
I think depending on possibly where it's at, you might cause issues. But for the most part, I've used this for a while. It's pretty safe. Like I've never actually had it like not work kind of as expected. But yeah, I don't think it's 100% bulletproof, if that makes sense. Yep.
How would you have handled an exception in that script that you were writing there? Or would it just stop?
it would just, like kind of what it did a second ago when I was like, "Ew, what's that?" It would exception right here, and things would blow up. Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. But on top of that, there are some people who are pretty cool in the Microsoft world, and they do want hot reload to work. So I'll skip the takeaways. You get the idea. Basically, there's multiple tools we can add to a solution. But this is kind of the cool thing I just found recently. At this guy's blog, he has one more tool called Browser Sync. He's doing a NETWatch. He's editing CSS, and he's going to edit the controller, and it's doing a hot reload. So I'll get out of the way so you can take a picture of that URL. And you can see me after the talk. I can give you the URL too. But here's how you can accomplish hot reload with .NET Core using the CLI watch tool. That's pretty awesome, right? That's just as good as what NPM can do with all of its HR switches and things like that. Okay? All right. So other things you can do in the quick edition, because I'm just going to skip through them, I think, based off time, is that you can do Nougat packages. You can create those from the command line with the pack command, and you can publish them to nougat.org. Actually, there's more typing involved, so I was not brave enough to do that. But basically, if you pack your class library project with release config in the directory you want with a package version and all the metadata around Nougat packages, that will just make the package happen. And here is an actual live command. I made a Nougat package a couple weeks ago for Kentico that will push your package that you made using this command to Nougat's public index, and it will update the public feed for your Nougats. Don't steal my key. That actually is partially the real thing, but I did munge it a little bit. But it is cool. I know we're kind of close, but I do want to show you just one quick thing about that. So if we did want to make the class library a Nougat package, .NET pack, that's all it takes. It makes it really fast. It puts it in your debug directory. So yep, and then explore here. Here's another quick tool. If anyone doesn't know that there's a Nougat package editor called Nougat Package Explorer that you can double click any Nougat package, and you can kind of see what's going on with the metadata and then what is in there. Instead of right-click renaming it to .zip and extracting the files and doing all that fun stuff, this will actually even let you edit the Nougat package. So Nougat Package Explorer is a pretty cool tool to use if you're not using it. Just want to show that. So past that. OK, so kind of just to wrap this thing up, here are the three major components of the .NET Core CLI. We have managing projects and solutions. We ran through new, add, solution, all that kind of fun stuff. We can build, test, run, and publish them with all those groups of commands. And then we can extend and package things and do our own tooling with .NET Core CLI using things like this. And again, you can add your own things, which I think is pretty cool. In summary, I think this is a must-have tool for any .NET developer. Anyone want to call me out on that? Good answer. I would say automate as much as you can in your projects, because this is really cool stuff that we couldn't do years ago. And forget you ever heard about project.json, because you do not want to fall over with the weight. And Kentico Cloud is a great headless CMS. So thank you, guys. Appreciate the time.